Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at another short Latin story. Now this one is called A Distinction Without a Difference, and it centers on Alexander the Great. And it comes from George L. Bennett's Easy Latin Stories for Beginners from 1879. Now you've heard me say in this series before that what Bennett is calling easy stories for beginners is not necessarily what I would. So you want to kind of pre-read this and see if it fits your level of Latin. There might be a few things that you don't know or a few bits of grammar that are a little more complicated. It kind of depends on where you are in your journey. I tend to use this with my Latin 2 kids, maybe even like 2, 3, depending on what we're doing and what we're covering. So somewhere in that intermediate range. But the reason they're great is they're really short. They often come from history or sort of anecdotes like this one or mythology, and they're a great way to break free from a traditional Latin textbook and just read something completely different. And a lot of them will spark, hopefully, your interest in topics that you might not have covered before in Latin class. So before we dive too far into it, if you really want to approach the story and understand it and read it, the first thing I would recommend that you do is do a pre-read and just get some of the vocab. So these stories are really old. I don't know of any vocab lists out there that exist, but you could probably make one pretty easily, or just scan through the story and kind of pick up any words you don't know. That's always a good start, just because it's hard to read if you don't know what the words mean. The other thing I'd recommend you do is try reading it aloud, right? So read the story aloud. You'll hear me read it as we go through this video. Not that my pronunciation is anything special, but at least you'll be able to hear it. If you have someone in class you can work with, another student or partner, whatever, have them read it back to you. That way you can work on your speaking, your pronunciation when you're doing the reading, and your listening skills when someone is reading it to you. You never want to shut these off. They're always great ways to kind of use all parts of your brain to learn Latin, right? You don't just want to translate it in your head. The last thing I'd recommend you do is try the read and reread method. I know these stories are short, but it still works. Read through the story, write down any problem areas you have, try to fix them, and then go back and reread the story and keep repeating that until you're able to read through this, start to finish, and you understand what's going on. That's how you know that you really absorbed and understood the story, and kind of locked it into more long-term memory and understanding how the grammar works, things like that. So use it that way, right? And it'll help you just develop your Latin as you go. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is I'll read you the story from start to finish, then I'll pause the video, and then we'll go over it together. So the story goes like this. You have Alexander, Macedoniae rex, latronem captum his verbis interrogavit. Quo tandem iure mare lacessis? Latro nihil timens respondit. Ego et tu eodem iure utimur. Unam autem parvam navem habeo. Latro igitur vocor. Tu autem magnis classibus et exercitibus praeis. Itaque victor vocaris. So again, we'll pause the video right there, right? If you want to repeat it, go back, right? Just play it as many times as you need to, right? So you can hear it, or like I said, even better, find another student or someone you can work with, a partner who can read it to you, and just work on your speaking and listening. But now what we're going to do is read through the story and translate. It's pretty short, but if you haven't done the translation on your own, pause and go do that, and use the rest of this video just as a double check to make sure that you're on the right track. But we dive in with this, and I told you it's about Alexander the Great. So you have Alexander, the Macedoniae Rex, right? The king of Macedon, or king of the Macedonians, or Macedonia is really what it is. So Alexander, king of Macedonia, or Macedon, he interrogavit means he questioned, right? He's interrogating a latronem captum, right? A captive robber or sort of pirate, you might even say. In this context, is probably a pirate, right? Or a thief is really what it is. But he's questioning him, and latronem captum, right? A thief having been captured. And he interrogated him with these words, he verbis. And he says, quo tandem iure mare lacessis. So he says, by what right, what iure, right? Do you, lacessis can mean like harass or attack. Probably is the best way to do is sort of harass the sea, because he's talking about a bandit and a pirate. So harass kind of works pretty well there, but you could say attack too. By what right are you doing this, right? So he's questioning this captive pirate. He's saying, what gives you the right to sort of harass the seas? Okay. Then you have latro nihil timens respondit, right? So the latro, the robber, or the bandit, however you want to do it, the pirate, he's described as timens nihil, fearing nothing. The timens there is your present participle. So fearing nothing, he responds, right? Or replied, you could even say. And he says, ego et tu eodem iure utimur, right? So you and I, right? Ego it to you and I, we use utimor, right? We use the same right, eodem jure. So Alexander just said, by what right do you attack and harass the seas? And he says, you and I are using the same right. Okay. And he says, unam autem parvam navem habeo. So he says, I have, right, a small ship, right? Unam. I have one small ship, and autem here is like sort of moreover, however. So he says, I have one small ship, one parwim nawim, and he says, igitor, right? Therefore, latro vocor. So therefore, I am called a pirate, a latro, a bandit. Okay. He says, you though, right, to autem, magnis classibus et exercitibus praes. So he says, you are in command, or kind of praes there is one way to say like command. It literally means something like to be in charge of, right? You see this a lot in Caesar when he's talking about the army, to kind of be present, or take the lead of, right? But be in charge or control is kind of a good way to do it too. So he says, you are in control of a magnis classibus, right? A great fleet and a great exercitibus, great armies. So he says, I have my one little ship, right? So I'm called a pirate. You're in command of great fleets and great armies. And therefore, itaque, victor vocaris, you are called a conqueror, right? A victor, right? A conqueror. So this is a short story, but it does a nice little anecdote here of saying, what's the difference, right? So Bennett calls this the distinction without the difference. The pirate is saying, what's the difference between you and I? We do the same thing, right? We're both attacking, conquering, the sea and different things. It's just I have my one small boat, so I'm a pirate, and you have big armies, so they call you a conqueror, right? Because you're you're a king. Okay, so it's just an interesting way to sort of a thought-provoking anecdote here of Alexander the Great and this pirate, but it does a good little job, like I said, of breaking up sort of a traditional Latin textbook, gives you something to read beyond it. And if you're curious about this, take a look, right? Look up Alexander the Great, maybe look up piracy in the ancient world, the ancient Mediterranean. There's some great articles and videos you can see on that. But one way or another, hopefully it made some sense, this story, and gave you something different to read. If you have any questions at all on the translation or anything like that, feel free to put them in the comments below. But otherwise, just keep practicing, keep reading this. You're looking for a time when you're able to read through this whole thing without needing any help. That's how you know you understood it and you're ready to move on to another story. Good luck with it.